been required to read books for school that are considered classics by authors like Jane Austen, Charles Dickens, and so on and so forth. And I know that a lot of people don't enjoy the books that they have to read in high school or college level English classes. They often are not books that you would have chosen to read on your own, and they might be written in a way that's very different from the books that you enjoy reading for pleasure. I know that as a student I didn't always enjoy the books that were assigned to me, and sometimes I resented having to read them instead of things that I would have preferred. But as an adult, I've gone back and I've reread some of the books that I had to read for school, and I've also read more books that are considered classics or come from the time periods that generally make up classic literature, and I've discovered that I actually enjoy quite a few of them. Although certainly I don't enjoy every classic book. I'm a big fan of Shakespeare, I'm a big fan of Jane Austen, and I've found a wide variety of classic novels and classic stories that I find really interesting and really enjoyable to read. So I wanted to make a video series talking about classic literature, either things that I have read for the first time as an adult that were never assigned to me in school, or books that I have read as required reading for school and then revisited as an adult. And I just want to talk about, first of all, what they're about, why they're considered classics, and my opinions of them, what I liked, what I disliked, who I would recommend it for, if I would recommend it at all. So that's why I decided to create this series, Catching Up on the Classics. And today we're going to start with A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. A Study in Scarlet is the first Sherlock Holmes story. The Sherlock Holmes stories include 4 novels and many short stories published in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. They were some of the very first detective novels. They were not the very first, but they preceded what we now know as the mystery genre, and they were kind of the ancestors of that. You can see a lot of influence from Sherlock Holmes, for instance, in Agatha Christie's Poirot novels. With A Study in Scarlet being the very first Sherlock Holmes story, it tells the story of how Holmes and Watson meet and how they begin solving crimes together, as well as, of course, following their first crime that they solved together. I actually had to read 2 Sherlock Holmes stories in school. I read The Red-Headed League in middle school and The Sign of the Four in college. And I did not particularly enjoy either one of those. But I started revisiting them a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed the ones that I read. My favorite has got to be The Hound of the Baskervilles, and my favorite short story is probably either The Silver Blaze or The Copper Beeches. But I wanted to start by talking about A Study in Scarlet because it is the first, and it does show us how this mystery-solving duo got their start. So basically, Watson is a retired army surgeon who has moved to London, and he's looking for a place to live, and he has a limited budget, so he needs a roommate. The story of many young adults in the present day. And he meets a friend who has an acquaintance named Sherlock Holmes who also needs a roommate, and so they move in together. Now, of course, the modern reader knows that Sherlock Holmes is a detective, but Watson does not know that at first. Holmes is very secretive about his profession at first, and so Watson is completely befuddled by all of what Sherlock Holmes knows, but then the things that he doesn't know that Watson considers to be common knowledge, like the fact that the Earth revolves around the sun, for instance. In any case, eventually Watson learns that Holmes is a detective, and they're called to the scene of a crime where a man has just been murdered. The letters R-A-C-H-E are painted on the wall in blood, and a woman's ring is found near the body. And the police don't know what to make of it, so they call in Holmes, who then starts to try and put together the clues. Now, I don't want to get too much into the result because, of course, this being a mystery, if you haven't read it before, I want to let you follow along and be surprised. Although I will say I found one part of the mystery really, really easy to solve. I figured out right away. No, I don't want to say it, but there's one part of it that I thought the details that Holmes fixated on and what we're told of it early on, I could figure out the profession of the murderer, let's put it that way. But as far as his name or his backstory, why he did it, I don't think that anybody could put that together because it wasn't one of those mysteries where you're given all of the clues that you need. It's not told from Holmes's point of view, it's told from Watson's, and Holmes doesn't tell Watson everything that's on his mind or everything that he finds out. That being said, I did think that the setup of the mystery was really good, and I did like the characters and their interactions with each other. However, the pacing was way off. If you're used to modern books that follow a typical like 3-act structure or something of that nature, you've got a beginning, you've got rising action that builds up to a climax, and then you have a resolution that puts things together, you will be probably disappointed. They find out who the murderer is and his name and everything well before the end. He's already in custody, and then we spend a whole other like novella-length book basically just finding out about his backstory and why he committed the crime. It's not the sort of pacing that modern readers expect, so it might come as a surprise to some people. The other thing I did not like was sometimes Sherlock Holmes books and short stories are not really what we would consider to be politically correct. They sometimes take kind of bigoted or biased views of anybody outside of the upper classes in Britain. A large portion of this book painted a really negative portrayal of Mormons. I don't know a whole lot about Mormons, so, please forgive me if I get anything wrong, but I'm pretty sure that murdering people and kidnapping their daughters to force them into polygamous marriages is not something that actually happens. In any case, that was something that I often find to be kind of uncomfortable in the Sherlock Holmes stories, and it is something to be aware of if you're considering picking it up. Another thing that might be a surprise to you is that there's really not a lot of immediate danger for Holmes and Watson. I know that a lot of modern adaptations of Sherlock Holmes make it more of an action-adventure type story. It's really not that. They spend most of their time either at the scene of the crime or at their apartment on Baker Street, just kind of talking through the case. The criminal doesn't show up until the scene where he's arrested, and while there is sort of an altercation between him and Holmes, it's really not the sort of thing where anybody's life is in danger at that point. So if you're expecting a lot of high-stakes action, this really isn't the place to go for it. In some more modern mysteries, for example, Agatha Christie was really famous for doing this. You would have a limited pool of suspects, only, 5 to 10 people who could have done it, and they were all in a certain place and none of them have an alibi. It's not that kind of thing. It could be anybody in London, basically, and we don't actually meet him until the scene where he is arrested, and so it's not the sort of thing where you can put together the clues and pinpoint who did it if you're clever enough to keep up with the detective. There is an element of, I think mysteries often kind of show the dark side of human nature or human psychology, and this does that. It investigates why someone would commit murders and what kind of state their mind would be in, what events in their past might lead them to do that, and I think a lot of modern mysteries do that as well. Usually the motive is a really important part of solving the mystery. But again, it's not the sort of thing where you could have any chance of figuring that out before Holmes reveals it. So who would I recommend this for? Definitely if you are a fan of Sherlock Holmes. If you like any of the modern adaptations of Sherlock Holmes, like the BBC series Sherlock or the American TV series Elementary, if you like any of the movies that are adaptations of Sherlock Holmes, I would definitely recommend going back and reading the original stories. If you have read some of the original stories, maybe you started with the short story book, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, or the novel, The Hound of the Baskervilles, which I think is generally viewed as the best of the novels, then I would definitely recommend at some point backtracking to the very first Sherlock Holmes novel, seeing how they met, how they got their start, and following it through chronologically. If you are a fan of the mystery genre, and you want to see kind of where it got its start, understand, of course, that this isn't mystery novels as you know them today, or even as they were in Agatha Christie's time, but this is kind of the predecessor of the mystery genre. And so if you're interested in seeing kind of the origins of that, I know that that's something that I enjoy. I like some modern science fiction TV shows like Star Trek, for instance, and I think it's really interesting to look at early science fiction novels and see how different they were from what science fiction looks like today and how it's kind of evolved over time. So if you like mysteries and you want to kind of see the origins of that genre, I would not recommend it if you want a modern mystery story or an action adventure. But if you're interested in the history of the genre, or if you're interested in Sherlock Holmes specifically, definitely I would recommend reading the Sherlock Holmes stories. So in any case, this has been what I hope will be the first of many catching up on the classics videos. Next month for Halloween, I hope to do a spooky novel like, for example, Dracula. And in the future, I'm probably going to look at doing a new one every 1 to 3 months, just depending on what my schedule is like and how much time I have to spend reading classic novels. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more in this series or more videos on reading, writing, classic literature, advice for college students, and so on, definitely feel free to subscribe. I post new videos once or twice a week, usually on Mondays and Thursdays.